Hello, beautifuls. You are listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Brooke Thomas, and I'll be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Vanessa Scotto. On the show, we're having conversations about the awakening spiritual path, and what does that even mean? What is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything, the beauty and the crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life? So just a little update on this end that now we're putting episodes out once per month. So if you want to be sure not to miss an episode with our new publishing schedule, just be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast player. And or you can subscribe to our email list, which is at blissandgrit.com. We'll send out episodes once they've come out, and we also send out resources we're loving from time to time. And if you're wanting more in-depth support as you navigate your own internal process, we do both also see clients privately. So feel free to go to the website for more information on that as well. And the last thing before we head into the conversation is that we do sometimes curse. So if you're in non-swearing company, you may want to wear headphones. Okay, here we go.
Well, hello, Brooke.
Hey, Vanessa.
Oh my gosh, it's been so long since we've recorded that, full disclosure for you listening, I'm nervous.
I know. Well, I feel like right now we're living through a time where so much changes in any given day or week or whatever that I feel like I'm time traveling to the past. And I'm like, right, podcast Vanessa on my screen.
Yes, it's super funny. Nervous simply, everyone, because it's been so long. I haven't been speaking in public in so long. And so here we are. And Brooke, it's about our 4-year anniversary.
I know. We looked it up right before we started because we couldn't remember 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and we're just about at exactly 4 years.
Yeah. So it's been a really amazing 4 years. And thank you all, so many of you, for listening literally that whole time. You know what that means, 4 years? That means well over 100 hours of us talking.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would have to look that up. It's a lot of talking.
There has been.
Yeah, because we've done 100 and something episodes. Yeah, 50, I don't know.
Oh, 100 and something, which means over 100 hours. And so, wow, we have had quite a bit to say over the years, huh?
Apparently, yeah. There was stuff to talk about and stuff to learn.
Yeah. So everyone listening, we wanted to share something that's really exciting and personal and sentimental for us today, which is that this will, for now, for as far as we can see into the future, this will be our final episode.
Yeah. I'm just leaving a pause for what I imagine might be. I don't think I'm being just self-absorbed here. I think some groans, I think about all of the lovely emails and notes, things that we've gotten even recently, as recent as yesterday. I had somebody write me and say, I've listened to every single episode of Bliss and Grit. It changed my life. It made me see patterns I'd never seen before. Can't thank you and Vanessa enough. And hearing those things is just profound and surprising, right? Like in our reality, I'm sitting in my office closet right now because it has the best sound when I live on a busy street. You're sitting in your guest bedroom and we're friends for 15 years or so. Yeah. And so hearing that from people always reminds me this is having a useful impact and it lives in the world.
Yeah, it's so well said, Brooke, because I feel the same way. Oftentimes you're just like, wait, huh? What? Me? I'm, someone's looking up to this experience, or they're really savoring the words that are coming out of our mouth. And it's such a beautiful thing. It's been one of the more touching things in my life, I would say. And I've had a life dedicated to people. So for all of you listening who've sent us notes and letters and social media comments, and for all of our clients and your Liberated Being members, it's been just such an honor. We have been so touched, well, I would say probably equally by all of you as you may have been by us.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. When Brooke and I were talking before, we were just saying that you've heard us say this before in episodes probably, but who knows if you'd remember. This was a journey. I mean, when we started this,
it's hard to remember back, what the mindset was or the frame was.
Yeah.
outside of, it did have that spontaneous nature of, well, we're having these conversations all the time. And we've said this on the show before, but truly when we get on the phone, it's a lot like an episode. Like we drop right into what thread we're following and what we're experiencing. And it just seemed like we could have them in public and maybe people almost listening in on us having coffee or a phone conversation with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And selfishly, it was a way to hang out with you more because when we started, I've been in Connecticut the whole time. Were you in Miami or?
Mm-hmm. I was
You were in
already in
Miami
Miami.
and now you're in Austin. So we've been long distance this whole time. So selfishly, it was a little extra Vanessa time for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's hard to remember the full frame that I had in mind, besides
Mm-hmm.
those core things that haven't changed when we started it.
Yeah, I think it was that we didn't want people to feel so alone on their path. We felt like we had to come together across the country just to have the kind of conversations we were having. It wasn't so readily available right next door to us at the time. And I think also, Brooke, I think it was because you and I have always had a compass that said, stop making spirituality seem like you're escaping being human.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we wanted to have conversations with real humans who have studied deeply, practiced, devotedly, but we're still having very human struggles. We didn't want to just present the after. We wanted to present the during so that, at that time we were saying really hashtag be human.
Right.
Like
Just be human. Yeah.
I think even at the time, when we started this, we were going to Dharma Ocean, right? We did this 5-month long meditating with the body training. That was part of where this idea was birthed. And one of the teachers on the training fell in love with one of the students. And, there was controversy and there was drama. And it was like right from the beginning, right from the inception of us deepening into our path, we saw, and people are just human. Teachers
Mm-hmm.
can be great. Teachers can point the way to unseen realities and to essential nature. And they're still subject to the conditions of being human. And so I think that was really important to us. And I think we did a pretty good job with that part.
Yeah, I sure hope so. It was definitely what was in our hearts doing the work, and what continues very much to be in our hearts is the old just be human. Like we're never not human. As long as we're in a human
Never
body,
not
it's
human.
what we got, is the human
Yeah.
experience as a particular person. So yeah, that was very much important as well that we bring that forward. And it felt really alive and in flow. And I think what it sounded like to people is what it felt like to us, which was that it was truly a conversation between friends,
Mm-hmm.
that we weren't trying to posture or present ourselves as teachers. It was really just like, let's have these conversations we're always having, except record them and put them in public. And of course, there's some little frame that comes in, right, where you're
Mm-hmm.
aware, like, who are we talking to right now, right? We're talking to people who are listening. You're aware that I'm not the only one with you in this conversation. But those conversations felt very alive. And I remember at some point, I don't remember how far into the process we were, but it occurred to us like at least a year in, like, oh, we're just recording our own unfolding experience. Like we're just talking about our path, which to anyone who's listening was duh, but to us, that's for whatever reason, what the call is of doing this show is to be real people in public, talking about their process. And that felt really right for a long time. And I think it served based on what I'm hearing from listeners who've contacted us. And then at some point, that process continued to, I don't know if deepen is the right word because it was always deep, but it hit layers that weren't quite so articulate. And I'm just speaking for me in my experience, and that I needed to be with them in that inarticulate space and to go really slowly and really somatically and experientially with them. And that continues to be the case for me. And so we had done an episode not too long ago. What did we call it? We were talking about the river.
Something like, was it the one where you're letting go of what you love?
Yeah. And it was when we were talking about doing less frequent episodes. I think we wound up talking about that very little, but it was also at the time when we were going to do less frequent episodes. And honestly, it was at about that time that I think you and I both, I don't want to speak for you, but just dropped into a different layer of experience that no longer wanted to be about capturing it every week and publishing it on a platform every week.
Yeah, for sure. Matt Kahn once said to me, I think I was talking to him about confidence and stepping into teaching more again, because I had always taught in my, as I call it, prior incarnation, but it was like, stress management or, self-help kind of style. And I felt really comfortable with that. But more like, what could I offer in teaching now? You and I have had such ripe, alive paths and stepping into the role in this moment. And I was talking to him about my trepidations about it. And he said, you will find confidence in silence. He said, when you sit in silence enough, confidence will be born out of that. You will know who you are essentially in the silence, and you'll trust it. And that struck a note with me. You all relate, like, this is such a time of sharing, right? I mean, it's so good. So many of us on this path, like so many of you all listening, you're so like-minded and like-spirited. We've tried to share, we've tried to be open, we've tried to be vulnerable, because really culture wasn't built like that, at least not in the United States. I'm sure in many places our culture was built on superficial conversation, right? And then being grossly general. So much medicine came from going deep in and then daring to share. Like, how many vulnerability hangovers did we get?
It's been 4 years worth of vulnerability hangovers, and I'm sure today will be no exception.
And we didn't do everything right. There were things we regretted. There were mistakes we've made. There were secrets we've shared about ourselves that we talk about with literally nobody in our personal lives.
Yes.
My husband still doesn't listen, so he's missed out on details that you all have. And we've had many a vulnerability hangover, and it's been powerful, actually very healing, because sometimes going through a process that's humbling is so invites so much of you forward. It's really so powerful. But also there is power to be gained in going inward and coming into some silence and, letting your process have its own life without any stimuli, without any feedback. And that's really where you and I both happen to land. And, we've always operated intuitively. You all know that about us. We started it intuitively. We barely remember why. We're ending it intuitively. We're just learning why after already wanting to end it, right, as it goes. But certainly part of it is we were no longer called to share our private process. And we were like, should we pivot? That didn't quite feel right. It was just like, okay, sometimes it's time to close a door and, follow whatever that alive impulse is.
Yeah. So that said, maybe we can share a little bit of the alive impulse as it currently is. Yeah. So you go first. What feels alive and juicy to you right now?
Oh, it's so funny. So quiet. I mean, God, this has been for all of us, like, let us just acknowledge the times we're in, right? Historical times, really historical times. And so being silent has been new for me. I mean, if any of you are on our social media, I've been running that, and I am talking, always out in public. And so it's been really a delight to challenge my own first technology addiction that I didn't know I have. But if you're on social media enough, like, you might want to check in. You might be, you might be falling into that too. So that was really lovely. And getting quiet has been Lovely. Oh my God. I mean, I'm verbose and I've been a public figure for a while now, 4 years. And I was teaching before that to build my business. So it's been really fun to be quiet and, um, and deeply reflective and introspective. And then I would say, oh my God, in typical Vanessa fashion, my love for the mystical and unseen has only grown, only deepened and widened. So it's like, really deepening my exploration around energy and the body. Like I was saying to you before, Brooke, like I am obsessed. Okay, one day I was sitting and meditating and I just got this clear thing, like, everyone talks about how we are the light. Like, are we? What does that mean? And, I'm down a rabbit hole on it. I know the concept. I can get it intellectually. I can get it from spiritual lingo, but like, what would that mean? Are we really energy bodies? And, we've had so many great people we've interviewed on that. You and I both believe in it, but to allow myself to go tripping down the rabbit hole of like how the cells are biophotonic and what does that mean? And what does sound vibration do to the cells? And what is our DNA? And what does it mean when people say DNA activation? And can we activate some kind of what the mystics would call divine blueprint? So this stuff has me ever fascinated. My meditations are like that. I'm doing yoga. I haven't done yoga in years. Like it's been just not calling to me, but I started doing yoga with Dr. Sue, like the Egyptian style yoga, and I'm in love with it. I
Nice.
mean, I am in love with feeling into my body in a whole new way, this kind of visceral power coming in a new way. I think that was one of the things I realized, one of the revelations I've had about myself recently was, wow, embodying power has never felt particularly safe to me. And that may not be obvious from the outside. You don't know how people perceive you, but from the inside. And that's for reasons in my life and my childhood and everything, but recovering a sense that I can trust in my own viscerality and strength and agency, and you could call it power, has been super fun. So I've been really into that. Like, what does it look like for all of us to take back our own agency, our own sovereignty, moving from codependence, not to independence, because I think that's a Western ideal that's created
Totally.
its own pathology, right?
Yeah. Cult of individualism. Yeah.
Yeah, but to interdependence. Like, what does interdependence really look and feel like? And how can we step into our agency so that we are our fullest contributors and receivers in this hopefully beautifully new interdependent society I pray and aim to create?
Just want to let that mic drop for a second. It's beautiful.
Thanks, honey.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, in typical Brooke and Vanessa fashion, we're both in completely different places for the exact same reason. Like for the exact same overarching, let's say, heart calling, which I always love about us. Yeah, so I've been stepping into doing more, having more voice, doing more teaching, inviting more guest teachers. So I run a community platform called Liberated Being that's an embodied practice group. I'm running a class right now about embodying safety and capacity. And so it's actually been super fun to, I have a lot of hide to be safe programming. And I'm sure a lot of people listening do as well. And it's a tough one. You feel so vulnerable doing anything. And for a long time, clearly I feel called to do public facing work. I've been doing this for, 7 years, 8 years. It started with Liberated Body. I like to teach and I like to learn, and I like to do both of those things in public. So, and yet there were always these ways of not quite feeling comfortable, just literally building a container that says like, I am engaged with this, and I'm happy to be publicly doing that, which doesn't mean at all anything to do with stepping on a pedestal or having all the answers or all those things, which again, it's another cultural frame about hierarchy, right? That you should be in a position of leadership or making or doing things when you've decided you deserve the hierarchical top dog position. And I don't believe in hierarchy. I think it's a load of shit. So I could never quite get the math to add up there. And then I just realized like, oh, that's just a cultural frame that can go. And then I can build something or some things that are based on this non-hierarchical exploration, which is a lot of what we did here too. Neither one of us were presenting ourselves as people with answers. And I love learning from lots of different people. And at the same time, I really realized we recently had Judith Blackstone, our teacher, creator of Realization Process, one of our teachers. I had her on as a guest speaker for Liberated Being. And it was one of those, like, it's what's right under your feet. Like, I find the realization process work around embodying your being and bringing that into the world, how you perceive yourself and the world and how you relate, to just be the most sophisticated, beautiful embodiment work. And so it was like, I mean, I love to learn. I spend a lot of time with a lot of different teachers, and it's like, maybe it's just the group I already belong to. I'm a part of the realization process people for a reason. Like, I think Judith's teachings they have that thrust that I really care about, where like, let's not get too interested in concepts or teach you how to monitor yourself better, which a lot of self-care does. Let's just help you experience something different. So I've found that I'm rededicating myself to that, and just like, keep it simple. This is the work you love. It's the work you teach. So I did the Healing Ground certification with Judith, with you, which used to be called the Spiritual Psychotherapy Training. And so I'm going to do the meditation training this year.
So fun. Super
fun. It's a 3-parter for those listening. And then the other one is the embodiment training, which isn't happening until 2021. So I'll do that then, or 2022. I don't know. So that's been really, really delightful to like grow a group there. And the larger question that I keep realizing I'm sitting with, like you said, you're more called to the mystical, which was always your calling. And I feel like I'm more called to like messing around with the Jenga tower of society. Like, what is the bullshit? Like hierarchy, like perfectionism, like what is the bullshit that we have been taught is just the way life is? And what happens if we can embody something different, which, like I said, through realization process practices is kind of where it's at for me. If we literally experience ourselves and the world differently, and we're able to be present and relating in a different way, what potential does that have for building a new world? Right. Like when I started Liberated Being, I think a tagline or something I had put on the website was like, if you're here, if you're wanting to give birth to a more highly conscious and more loving world. And it's like, I really mean that. It's not just something to aspire to. Like, let's do it. Let's practice embodiment, and at the same time kind of pull out some of those Jenga tower pieces of society that aren't true, so that we can both embody what we are at the same time that we're seeing what we're not. So that's really, to say it's compelling for me is the understatement of the world. So it's felt delicious to be like, yeah, just step on in with that. And I see Liberated Being, which what it is now is 6 days a week. We do practice together, and twice a month we have guest teachers. And I see that container actually shaping up even more. Like, I'm going to make it much more clear around, this is, embodying a different way of being to call in the new world. and to see
That's
what the
great.
old world is. So I'm super excited about that. That's been totally delightful.
Well, and so important. I mean,
Yeah.
now, thankfully, with the systems of oppression becoming more clear to people, thankfully, more people having their eye on it, I think it's very powerful to look at activism as having these multiple layers underneath it. I've always come from the thought process that shifting consciousness helps shift culture,
Mm-hmm.
helps, right? Like you have to act, you have to do all the thing, but when you look at someone like Resmaa Menakem's work, or so many of the people you've had in Liberated Being, it's like embodiment shifts consciousness and helps you live new in a world that you're creating anew. So
Yeah.
I love that. I love embodied activism as a part of it.
Yeah. And that embodiment is, so we can be clear about what actions to take that aren't just perpetuating the cultural hamster wheel. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and I was like, I feel like I've spent my whole life, really, actually, when I think about it, because as a kid, my brother and I always felt very outside of what was happening in the neighborhood because it was just filled with a lot of craziness. And so we would observe other kids our age and other parents from this point of view of like, what is going on with these people? And so he and I had this like little lab of like, what is society? Like, what is this? That people think this is just a way to be. So honestly, I've been that way since I was little. But I was talking to a friend recently and I was like, I feel like my whole life I've been like describing, that old story about describing the elephant.
Yes.
Like, yeah, you blindfold people and they're touching an elephant and one can feel the trunk and they're like, it's snake-like and long. And the other has a leg and it's like, no, it's leathery and thick. And the other has a tail. And I was like, I feel like I've spent my whole life describing an elephant. And I just finally was like, oh, it's like white Western culture is the elephant I've been describing, Oh, and it's perfectionistic and it's narcissistic and it's sociopathic and it obsesses over busyness and it has hierarchy. And I was like, oh my God. So
Right. And
anyway,
racism and
yeah,
oppression
right.
and
Yeah, that hierarchy
fragility
needs
and
to
shame.
oppress, groups of
Yeah.
people because someone needs to be demarked as top of the heap.
Yeah.
So that was interesting and continues to be interesting. And it was just that like, oh, it's an elephant. Like I've been describing an elephant my whole life. And
Yeah.
that's what this looks like. So that feels like a beautiful calling for me. And then the other huge piece of my life is that my son's quasi homeschooled. We belong to a homeschool co-op. So I'm not his teacher and he's around peers all day. And in non-COVID times, we have a building that we go to that has a campus. But it is homeschooling in the sense that we put together a curriculum, we hire teachers, and I contribute to teaching at that school, and it's a really exciting part of life, like that you can, again, giving birth to a new society, like we're doing whole curriculums around an actual history of the United States, told from Indigenous lens, told from Black and brown lens, things that I didn't get taught in Massachusetts, where we would just go on trips to Plymouth Rock and talk about rah-rah pilgrims all the time. And I am doing a class with them around understanding the equipment you have. Like, what is your autonomic nervous system? And how do you become more conscious of the fact that you don't have to be hijacked by life and you've got lots of options, and teaching that to the teens. So it's another sort of teaching, learning, yum place, but also involves my favorite person, my son. So, and his peers. So that's another piece that's very juicy and takes up a lot of my life.
I think it's fair to say that you and I both probably wished that at some point earlier in life, people could have offered this type of stuff to us, right?
Yeah.
That at some point earlier in life, someone, could have helped shape us or given us tools or shown us a little extra love and compassion, whatever,
whatever. Told us it was okay to be human beings, or just like a little heads up. Like, do you know how you think it seems crazy out there? Like it kind of is. Like there's a lot of good as well, not right teaching kids to be paranoid about a terrible world, but that's, yes, there's a lot of
Right.
misaligned values that you're watching
Yeah.
play out. That's correct. Right.
Right. You're not crazy. It is broken.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I think a lot of people have that fantasy, like we wish it could have come earlier. So when we have the chance to help somebody who is younger than us or, at a tender phase of life, we're like, oh my God, please let me see if I can offer something that will interrupt some of the suffering that happens when people don't have the tools or
Yeah.
have a different perspective or have basic love and compassion and belonging and all of the things we all need so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's a big heart calling because it truly is like answering my younger self's prayer for me. And now I get to do that with my son and his peers and just be like, yeah, let's step out of the frame and just be real about this and like come up with curriculums that fit. And right, it's also curriculums like math and, so it's not all stuff that's whatever off the beaten path. But again, like what are ways that that is useful, accessible, and not just the sort of robot training to have more cogs in the machine, spitting more cogs out for the machine by the time they finish high school or college. Yeah.
Well, that is beautiful.
Yeah. It feels good. So it was fun to look at the topography of what's alive for us. I mean, makes sense that.
Yeah, and also I keep meaning to tell you this. I have so many people that are in your group and I get to like hear all these tidbits like, "Oh, well this speaker came and said this and this." And I'm like, "Oh my God, it's so fun." It's
Yeah.
actually a community. Like people are
Yeah.
talking to each other. Oh my God, you know how hard it is to get people to talk in a forum? It's like
I
and
know.
I feel like now, I've even recommended it to some clients because I think it's a time where a lot of people might be feeling lonely. Maybe you're trapped at home with someone that's difficult for you to be with all of the time. Maybe you're alone and you're feeling it. Maybe you're just an extrovert and you're feeling alone because there's not enough contact. Or maybe you're struggling with something that not everybody gets. And so you feel, super overwhelmed by it. Whatever it is, it's a time when we could use deep community,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, we're in a phase of the world, we're in an experience where so much trauma is coming up for people,
Yeah.
right? Just obviously so, with really good reason, and so having a place where people can go and have a deep conversation, like say what's actually in their heart or what's in their mind or what they're struggling with is such a big deal because one of the burdens of our society is you mostly deal with it really alone.
Yeah. And that was a huge part of the intent is like, can there be a place, not Facebook, where we can come together? It's not on Facebook, where we can come together and, um, actually talk about the unfolding and trying to shift our way of being, which is not something that is a dominant cultural value. And so a lot of us do feel really um, alone. And it helps to not be alone in that, to be able to hear like, oh, other people, feel like they, simple things, right? Like can't get out of their own head. Like
Mm-hmm.
we kind of all know that's true, but it's helpful just to hear like other people can talk about those things.
Mm-hmm. Or you can be having just such a deep wellspring of pain and you can talk about it with people, but that doesn't mean they'll get it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's helpful to have a community of people who are plumbing the depths,
Mm-hmm.
right, together. That's one of the things that I think we meant to offer with the show. I assume we did. I hope we did. And I know we gave it to each other is people who are plumbing the depths.
Yeah.
Right. What I've gotten over this year, just in a more integrated way than I had before, is, which is going to sound really simple, but it's deep when it happens, is you really just have to be you. right? Like you have to be you and live with the consequences of being you, whatever that is. Maybe not everybody likes it. Maybe you'll make hard decisions, whatever that is. And in this process, we can all acknowledge that for us, at the very least, for many people listening, we're deep people. We're vertical people.
Yeah.
And so we're always going to be looking at the multiple layers or trying to do the work or, exploring a process or dropping into other perspectives that may not be superficially available to us. And that's just part of who we are. It's not good. It's not bad. I think it's pretty good, if I was to label it. But if we just look at it as existence, neutral existence, and that hasn't really been the norm of our culture. People will talk about emotions, but that doesn't mean they go deep into experience. Emotions are different. They can be very superficial. I'm pissed off.
Yeah.
That's an emotion.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you're sharing why or what's happening inside or what it hurts or what you're afraid of, right? That's something that hasn't been so common in mainstream culture. And many of us, that's what we need. And if we've tried to connect with people in that way, it hasn't always gone well for us. And so just to have a friend or a colleague or a place like this, and there's other places I'm sure that are like this, where you can express the depths because that's who you are. You're a depth diver. I think that's beautiful. And I know people are getting that out of a virtual community, which is pretty impressive, Brooke.
Yeah, thank you. And it's really sweet to hear that, people who are benefiting from it. And anyone who's listening to this episode, the show is ending. And I hear so often from people that they're, back when we did weekly, right, looking forward to it every week, and that it just feels like it's an integrated part of their own process, and like they're having kind of coffee with two of their friends, and like you said, plumbing the depths, having real talk. And so what I would just say with the episodes going is, put out your little spidey senses about the other people that you can attract, where you can have if you don't have this already, you can have these conversations, that you can keep that flame alive outside of listening to a show and call it in your life.
And, you'd be surprised that, are you noticing that maybe more people are available for that right now than maybe would have been in the past? I think there's so much happening that people are going to different places within themselves. I think in part people are being challenged in a way that's so intense that it's coming out. But for many, I think it's just been an invitation to go deeper, to reflect more, to get to know themselves more. All of those things are true. So that's been a beautiful thing to see. Like even in just my friend group, some people coming alive to parts of themselves that they haven't explored, or conversations coming forward that may not have happened in the past. That's something that is beautiful to me to witness.
Yeah, I was joking with a friend of mine the other day that we're like living in the era of karmic hothouse, like a greenhouse filled with all these karmic seeds, but it's like a hot greenhouse. And so the acceleration of growth has just become so rapid. So whatever it was or is for us as individuals, that was maybe a little ways down the road or years down the road, it's like, oh, nope, here it is right now. Time to clear this out right now. And societally as well, all those things. And I don't mean that in a like, so then it'll all just get cleared out. It's going to be great. But like everything's rising to the surface. And so the ability, and of course, as a white woman of privilege, I was able to not notice those things. So for the people who had the privilege to not notice those things, everything's getting pushed up to the surface. So this is karmic greenhouse time in our personal lives and our cultural life as well.
Yeah. Wow. So we've been through a lot here, huh?
Yeah.
And we've been deeply loved and adored, which I've felt. And we've also been humbled Thank y'all for writing in, who've needed to write in.
And being humbled is good.
It is good. I was just talking about this the other day with a client, like humility, like being humbled when it happens within yourself and in a live process, like, wow, I am a human being and I am X, Y, and Z doing the same thing on repeat, not capable of doing that, not exactly who I wish I could be right now. All of those things. It's a beautiful part of letting your ego get deconstructed.
Yeah.
Right. So that something new and more wholesome, holistic, more true can come through. But I think being humbled is so close to humiliation, so close to shame, that oftentimes when we do begin to feel that humbling, which can be so powerful for us, so potent and rich, it can like slip into little shame loops. And for us in the beginning, that was the case,
I remember lots of long conversations of like, oh, the shame, but it was a necessary and really beautiful part of, breaking down the ego.
Yeah. And then letting us have more resilience, like more capacity, more self-trust, more self-forgiveness to be like, that wasn't perfect, but okay, let's get up and try again. We can keep putting ourselves forward. And in a way, isn't it interesting? Capacity grows by testing your limits, right? Now, you can't put yourself in a complete die zone or your capacity gets blown out because it's too much risk. But this show tested our capacity regularly, right? Our capacity to like not collapse into shame or self-judgment or fear or people pleasing or fawn or freeze,
Yeah.
All of the different things that can come up. So if any of you are thinking about a podcast, highly recommended, even though
it's a great personal growth tool and a great learning tool.
Yeah, and such a great community builder. I mean, that's one of the really powerful things that we've experienced is, you talk about all this stuff and it's like, truthfully, like you heard us say at the beginning, you're thinking, who wants to hear this? And then all of a sudden, like people want to hear it and you're astonished that someone's finding value in your experience, right? Not just in your objective knowledge, not just in your book smarts, but in your experience. And people are finding value in your joy and your pain and your expansion and your contraction. It's kind of a powerful, I guess it's like a powerful healing around the idea that you had to be perfect. In order to be loved, you had to be some kind of superhuman in order to attract clients or have friends or be appreciated. I mean, one of the biggest surprises of doing this was that people would want to work with me after hearing that I'm imperfect.
Yeah.
Like, what? Wait, what? Don't you just want to work with people who have all the answers?
Who got it all figured out? Yeah.
And if there's like one platform I could stay on, it's like, it is the end of teachers having all the answers as far as I'm concerned. Like, can we be done with that phase? I could preach on that pulpit.
Let's be done with that.
For a very long time, because one of the gifts of Bliss and Grit was we had enough time with teachers to realize every single one of them was human. Every single one of them still had some conditioning. And we've seen enough harm happen in spiritual communities and of course in the world, but just in the spiritual communities alone to say, no one has all the answers. We're never not human, right? And that in fact, there's something even more powerful by allowing yourself to be imperfect and to be human, not only for your own experience of wholeness and truth, but additionally, it's very validating and healing to others.
Yeah. And from the inside out perspective, it keeps you humble. Like I was just rereading John Prendergast's book, The Deep Heart. He's another very important mentor to me. And he's one of those people, him and Judith and a few other people, that when I'm with them, I'm like, this is what a profoundly embodied person feels like, and then the aspirational part of me is like, maybe when I'm in my 60s, right? Like I will be like this too. But I was reading a segment from his book where he was talking about how he had had some realization and how he kind of started getting this mental narrative going about how he was there for super important calling and he was going to be an important spiritual teacher, and that like passed, that sort of narcissistic tendency passed very quickly for him. But just reading that it happened like for John too, who's one of the most humble, grounded, heart-centered people I know, it's like, yeah, it's important, right? To see through this story that anybody is going to have all of the answers or be the super important winner of the spiritual Olympics, the one with all the keys to the locks for enlightenment. Yeah, that's just not true.
Oh, yes.
That is not a thing.
Deep relief. And we say that from the perspective of people who have surrendered a certain amount of autonomy to the favor of a teacher who seemed like they knew things, they knew everything. Yeah. And so this is coming very much from, of course, personal experience as well as observation and conversation with people. So that seems about it, Brooke. You want to talk about what's happening for you, like where people are going to find you? We're not gone. We're not disappearing.
Yeah, we still exist.
Are still around. I taught in Brooke's community not long ago.
That's right.
You never know what we'll come up with, but what is happening for you these days? You mentioned it, but let's just bring it home.
Yeah, so Liberated Being is a .community, not .com, if you want to go check it out. And I think I haven't actually articulated this to the members, so maybe I'll let the cat out of the bag before we publish this. Surprise! I think I'm going to close it to new members mid-September, and then reopen it December or January in the form of that we're actually going through a 10-month process, that people are committed to the 10 months and that we have like one retreat a month with guest teachers, and that it goes in a specific order about like core competencies of embodiment and how we bring that to societal change. So it's about to go through a big shift. So if you want to get in before it closes up, that's there. And I'm doing my embodying safety and capacity class, which isn't, we're about halfway through. More than halfway through almost. That's been lovely. I might run that again, but people can stay in touch on the Liberated Being website or my personal one, which is brookthomas.me. I'm also still accepting new coaching clients these days for embodied coaching. So anyone who would like some one-on-one support, whether in a like one-off form or a long-term invested form, that is also available.
I should have asked you before. I meant to. So we do still have a mailing list from our Bliss and Grit mailing list. And it seems to me like that's still a fine place to go if you want to. And, you can sign up, or those of you who are on it. I think we can let people know if we're up to things. Sometimes it's just easy. They're already on that mailing list. I meant to ask.
We have a much smaller number of people on the list than people who listen to the show. So if you want little updates, you can sign up there or on our individual websites.
Yeah, I don't actually have a mailing list on my website. So TBD on that. But one day I will be back on social media, I'm sure. That seems likely, though I have been off it for 1.5 or 2 glorious months, and it has felt really good. And so far, every time I'm popping back on, I'm still not ready. Though I do have a feeling I will be back on social media to announce that this is coming out. So
right. There will be, you'll be forced into it just for a little bit.
We'll see. You may see me there. I'm not up to much right now, to be honest. Brooke, you ever feel like something is ending, but something new hasn't quite begun?
Mm-hmm. The still point is a real thing.
I just feel so much that, and I think it's part of the quiet. It's like, I can't seem to speak from the old me, but I'm not quite ready to speak from the new me, so to speak. There's a transitional experience happening. So I'm excited to see who I wind up being and what winds up coming out of my mouth these days. I felt compelled to write again for the first time in months a week ago. So we'll see. But right now I'm actually I see my clients, which is amazing. It takes a lot to stay sane these days and just be like really balanced for the people that you work with. And so I do that. That's been wonderful. And I don't know, but I am sure y'all will hear from me. Feel free to stay in touch. My website's vanessascotto.com. We'll just put all this in the resources. I think that seems logical. And you'll find us on social media. I'll be there sooner or later.
Someday, maybe. Or not.
Yeah, maybe.
Whatever.
Definitely not Facebook. So go ahead on over to Instagram.
Not Facebook. Yeah.
And you can find me there. And I think it's just fair to say we can kind of wrap up. It has been one of the funnest things to do this with you, Brooke. Like,
totally.
Informative, fun, inspirational, challenging, pushed all our edges. We couldn't figure out technology. Every time we interviewed a teacher, I was like,
no, there was always something that was going to go wrong.
Sick to my stomach. Yeah. And I've grown the most and I've learned the most. I don't even feel like the same person I was when I started.
I feel like a completely different person. And I think that that's probably the top thing that was sweetest about this, is that it was a genuine, almost unintended, but genuinely a healing container, and we've come out the other side different people, and in our next healing container, right? Or like, maybe I wouldn't say healing, but evolving, shifting, living container, right? It's been really potent, I would say.
Yeah. Transformative. Absolutely transformative. Thank you all so much for listening to us, for sharing with us, for being with us, honestly, for loving us so much. We have gotten so much affection from so many of you, and it really has meant the world to us. We can't wait to continue to get to know all of you and be with all of you in whatever form life opens that up in.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's meant the world to me and to both of us.